Okay, welcome. This video is going to show everybody how to air layer camellias, okay? And this is a pretty large plant, as you see, and it has this beautiful bloom. This is R.L. Wheeler variegated, okay? This is typical of some camellias that are in older homes, maybe somebody's grandmother, and they want this particular, they want part of their grandmother's plant. It doesn't have to be an older plant, it can be any variety, but we're going to propagate in the air this branch right here and then plant it in a pot. Probably you've heard of layering things. A lot of people get a azalea branch and put it and bend it down and put it down in the dirt and put a brick on top of that branch. Maybe they scrape the bottom of the branch and the azalea bush will root down in the ground. Come back maybe a year later and cut it off and you have a new plant. That's layering. And you can layer lots of things down in the dirt. But we're going to layer this camellia up in the air because camellias, they're hard to, it would be hard to bend this down and get it down in the ground. So we're going to do it in the air. And we'll have this variety, okay? And you still have this existing bush. Okay? Lots of people go to older yards that have big bushes. This one needs trimming anyway, so instead of just trimming all these and throwing them away, you can air layer them. Okay, the first step, and I've already done a little bit of this, is find a branch that's growing straight up. Okay? You don't want one of these lower ones that are growing out to the side. They're just not as vigorous. One that's growing straight up. And you want one, this is like to me the perfect size. It could be just a little bit larger, okay? And it could be a little smaller, but that's about right. And you want it to be about 2 feet from where you're going, right here where my hand is where I want to air layer it, and that's where the roots will be. You want it to be, about 2 foot, okay? If it gets too large, they don't respond. They get roots, but it's just hard for them to be vigorous. Okay? So the first step, you could come in and remove some leaves to have, and other branches where you have a good little area to work with. Okay. Now, okay, you might want to zoom in. Okay. Okay, you find an area and you have to remove all the bark, okay, the outer bark, and it needs to be about 1.5 inches. Okay. So you'll see what I'm doing. I'm just going to score it, okay, just slightly, all the way around, okay, okay, at the bottom, okay. Then I'll come up about 1.5 inches. It can be 2 inches, it doesn't have to be exact. Okay, and make a little slit again, okay. So I've got 2 little cuts. Now I'm doing this a little bit earlier than you normally would, okay. And I just made a cut from the top to the bottom. Normally I'm doing this actually in January because I wanted to get the video to everybody so that you could have time to watch it and be ready to do this. The best time to air layer is at the end of March, at the earliest, the end of March, all through April. April's a wonderful time. You can even do it into the first week or so of May. But it starts getting hot in May. So April is a wonderful time to do this. In April, the plant will be starting to put out some new leaves and energy will be rushing up through the limb. And when you make these cuts that I've just did, and you make this little cut going down, you can just get your fingernail and that bark it's called slipping. The bark is slipping. See, now I'm taking the bark off, but it's being a little hard, okay? In April, it would just come right off, okay? So that's called when the bark is slipping, and April's a good time to do that. You don't have to, you can do it now, but you just have to scrape the bark off. See what I'm doing with my knife? Okay. Right under the bark, you see a dark green layer? That dark green layer is the cambium layer, okay, cambium. That's where all the nutrients and energy go up and down through the branch. You've got to remove every bit of that little green cambium layer, okay? Now, my wife wouldn't want me to show you this. If you can slip into the kitchen and find her potato peeler or carrot peeler, that's also good to, you can just peel that back. I normally do it with a knife because if she finds out that I've done it with this potato peeler, I'm in trouble. Okay. So I'm gonna put that down. Now, even though that I've gone all the way around it, do you see there's still some dark green right here and some dark green? And if you're not careful, that can heal itself. The green here might latch on to the green here and it heals itself, and so nutrients are, and it will not put out roots. Okay, so after you get it like this, scrape it. Okay, even if the bark is slipping in April, still scrape until you get to the white wood. Okay? Make sure you do it all the way around. Okay? All the way around. Okay? Okay? It can be a little bit ragged at the top and bottom, but make sure all that green is removed. Now, the roots are going to start developing right here at the top. Okay? It's something about the plant. It's putting, it's trying to get energy and nutrients, and it gets right here, and it'll start putting out roots at the top. Okay? Later, it'll take about 5 months. Okay, 5 to 6 months after you perform this. So if you do it in April, it's going to be around September, maybe October, and you're going to come back and you're going to cut this below, and you'll plant it in a pot. Okay, and I'll show you that in just a minute. Okay, so the first step is to remove the bark and the cambium layer from 1.5 inches of the plant. Okay, next step, get sphagnum moss. Okay, not peat moss. It's kind of like, I think I've heard people say long grain. And this is a big, huge bag. You can get smaller bags at Home Depot and Lowe's. So let me show you what it looks like. It's this, it looks like hanging moss, or what you make a bird's nest out of. Okay, but get that, put it in a bucket full of water, and let it soak. Let it soak at least 3 or 4 hours. I often let mine soak overnight till it's just sopping full of water. Okay, then get a good handful, like a big softball size. Okay, and squeeze out as much water as you can. Really get it. Okay, it soaks it up. You don't want it to be soggy or it's going to rot. Okay, but squeeze out that water. Now, open it up. You're going to try to make like a hot dog bun. Okay, some people call it a bird's nest, but kind of think of it more as a hot dog bun. Okay. Now, here's where it's always nice to have an extra hand if you've got your spouse or buddy or neighbor, but I've always done it by myself, which makes things a little bit tricky. We're going to put that around the branch, around where we cut, so that roots can come out. Okay. Now, before I do that, it's not required, but it helps if you get some rooting hormone, just root tone or any kind of rooting hormone. All the little stores, Home Depot, Lowe's have it. Little powder, and just put it around, especially the top. You can put it all over, but we want roots coming out of the top. You don't really want roots down at the bottom, but you can put it all around. Some people even like to sprinkle it in their bird's nest. It's just a rooting hormone. Now, we've got to keep this little hot dog bird's nest from falling apart, so I have some plastic wrap. Now, this plastic wrap, when you're doing it by yourself, can make you want to cuss, especially if it's windy, because it'll stick all together and make a mess. So bear with me if I'll try not to cuss, okay? But make sure you cover the top part, okay? And then wrap the plastic. And I'm sure I'll have the most trouble I've ever had with this one. But wrap the plastic around. Sometimes I just get one, when I'm doing it by myself, I get one on there and I come back and put another layer if I need to. Okay. But get it covered good. Then you can use some electrical tape to secure the bottom. Because we want the moisture, we don't want it to dry out, okay, over the months that is rooting. And you can probably see why it would help to have somebody doing it with you, to have an extra hand. Okay. But get the plastic wrap. Okay. Now, if I didn't feel like I did a great job, I can put another layer of plastic wrap. Okay. But plastic wrap, then you need to protect it from the sun. Okay. And you get heavy duty. I'm cheap. I tried to get to some light duty to save money, and it just broke apart and didn't do good. But you want to get, what is this, tin foil, okay, aluminum foil. You see the shiny side? Supposedly the shiny side, birds will see their reflection and peck holes in it. I don't know if that's true. But put the dull side on the outside and just put it around it. And you want to like cover your hot dog. Pretend like you just made a good hot dog and you're going to cover it. Okay. And just cover your hot dog. Okay. Squeeze it at the top and the bottom. Okay. If you did like this, you can, these leaves won't hurt anything to get rid of. Okay. Kind of squish it together. Okay. And then you can come back with the exact same electrical tape to secure it, or sometimes I use these little zip ties. Okay, I like them. It makes things a little bit easier. Well, so you can tighten the bottom, tighten the top, so that it doesn't the tin foil doesn't accidentally, slip off. We could have done that with the aluminum, with the plastic wrap also. Okay. Now, you'd want to come next, especially when a grower is sharing their property and allowing several people to make air layers. You want to come and put a little ribbon on it. This is just Surveyor. And put your name and what date and maybe what the variety is, because in 5 months, okay, maybe 6 months, but in around 5 months, I come and if you feel it, if it's hard like a baseball, that's a good sign. That means roots are growing. Okay? If it's still soft and squishy, there's no roots in there. Okay? Now, air layering on japonicas, you get a pretty high percentage. I'd say 75–80% will root. Okay? Reticulatas and some really hard to grow japonicas, you want to avoid. Okay? Reticulatas are hard enough for a professional to grow roots. Often they have to be grafted, but the typical japonicas do very well. Okay? Now, let's speed forward. Okay? Let's 5 to 6 months. Okay? And 5 months later, man, it's hard as a rock. You're feeling really good. Okay? You want to come and snip it off down here at the bottom. Okay, down at the bottom. Then you can take all this apart and check out your roots. Okay, but you'll have something like this. Now, remember, this is still January. I did this little practice one just yesterday. So this one's not going to have roots either, but I wanted to give you the idea because we want to plant it. So you open it up. Be careful not to break the roots. So here's my plastic bag, and you would see all kinds of roots. Okay. Now this one's probably going to fall apart because it's not going to have roots, but I still want to show you. Carefully, you would take it apart, and it's going to be a bit dry. Okay, and it'll have roots everywhere. It's going to be hard and dry. So when you open it up, you want to soak it. Soak the ball in just some water for, at least several hours, maybe even a day. Wouldn't hurt to let it absorb water, okay? Then, if it has any blooms, see this has a lot of blooms, take all of the blooms off. That's just using up energy. Then for a plant this size, you want a 1 gallon pot is a little bit too small. They'll fall over. 3 gallon is too big. So about a 2 gallon pot, I think, is perfect. Okay? And you want to get your mix, you want it to be very light. Okay? Very light. No topsoil. Do not use topsoil. That'll hold water and they'll rot. But pine bark, sand, perlite. Okay? And fill your pot up. Do not overpot. You want this root ball to be barely covered up. Barely cover up that root ball. Okay? You pack it in, and it's going to be a little wobbly. So I suggest getting a stick, putting it in, and then using some of our same zip ties, which I have down there somewhere, but are some tied up. Okay. Then water it good and put it in a fairly shady spot. Not total shade, but part sun, part shade, a little on the shady side, and sprinkle it. Sprinkle it with water every day for a couple weeks. The foliage. Okay. Make sure it just stays moist. Don't just sop it every day, the pot, but you could, some people put it in a mist house, okay? But leave it in a shady spot, make sure the wind doesn't knock it down. And if you harvest these in the fall, most growers recommend growing it an entire year, okay, in the pot. And then October, November, December, the following year, plant it in the yard. Okay? Now, it's a wonderful way to get a good sized plant very quickly. Now do let me warn you, air layers will, when you plant them in the ground, they will typically just sit there for about 3 years and just establish roots. They won't grow much. Often they'll put out lots of buds. But even the second year, the year that it's in the ground, and even the third year, it'll put out it's hard to do, but I would remove most of the buds, the blooms, okay? Let it get established. But they will, my experience, it takes 4 to 5 years after you plant it in the ground for them to really start growing and performing well. But it's just a really nice way to get a special plant that you want. Okay, so I hope you enjoy this, and around April, okay, I recommend give it a try.